Title: Open Sky, Mended Heart. Logline: a taciturn rancher, seeking only a rifle, discovers a brutalized woman hidden in a store's back room, unearthing a town's dark secret and forging an unexpected path to love and healing in the unforgiving Montana territory. Characters: Clara Hawthorne, 30s, a widow, newly arrived in the frontier town of Redemption, seeking a quiet life and honest work. Possesses a gentle demeanor but an unyielding inner strength. Skilled in needlework and with a quiet intelligence. Elijah Coulter, late 30s, a reserved, hardworking rancher, owner of the Open Sky Ranch. A widower with an 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Carries his own grief but possesses a deep well of quiet kindness and fierce loyalty. Silas Blackwood, 50s, owner of Blackwood's Mercantile, outwardly respectable but inwardly rotten with greed and cruelty. Primary antagonist figure: Jedediah Jed Stone and Abel Patch Rooker, 30s-40s, Blackwood's brutish associates. External menace: Lily Coulter, 8, Elijah's daughter, a bright, curious child who misses her mother and craves gentle affection. The innocent/dependent: Martha Henderson, 60s, a kind, sharp-witted widow who runs the town's boarding house and becomes a nurturing ally to Clara. Sheriff Brody, 50s, the town sheriff, somewhat overwhelmed and preferring peace to active investigation. Overarching quality: a pervasive sense of quiet dignity and resilience, even amidst hardship. Initial story tones: melancholic, lonely, desperate, quiet suffering, facing injustice. Part 1: The Discovery. The bell above the door of Blackwood's Mercantile in Redemption, Montana territory, gave a thin, reedy jingle as Elijah Coulter stepped inside. The late autumn air, crisp with the promise of an early winter, clung to his worn denim jacket. He paused for a moment, his gray eyes, accustomed to the vast sweep of prairie and sky, adjusting to the shadowed interior. The store was a jumble of goods: sacks of flour and sugar, bolts of calico, tools, tins of coffee, and, behind a sturdy counter, a rack of rifles. It was a rifle he'd come for. His old Winchester had seen better days, and the wolves were growing bolder near his Open Sky Ranch. The usual scent of pipe tobacco, oiled leather, and bulk spices seemed muted today, overlaid with something else: a faint metallic tang that pricked at his senses. And it was quiet, too quiet. Silas Blackwood, a man whose voice usually boomed with false bonhomie, was nowhere to be seen. "Mr. Blackwood?" Elijah called out, his voice a low baritone that rarely rose in volume but carried nonetheless. Only silence answered, a heavy, waiting kind of stillness that set the hairs on the back of his neck on edge. He'd lived too long on the frontier, faced down too many dangers, not to trust his instincts. Something was wrong. He moved further into the store, his boots thudding softly on the planked floor. The counter was unattended, a ledger splayed open, ink spilled across a recent entry. Behind the counter, the door to the storage room was slightly ajar. It was from there, he now realized, that the faint, disturbing odor emanated, stronger now. Mixed with it was another sound, barely perceptible, a soft, rhythmic rasp, like a painful breath being drawn. Elijah's hand instinctively went to the Colt Peacemaker holstered at his hip, though he didn't draw it. He pushed the storage room door open wider. The room was cramped, stacked high with crates and barrels, dimly lit by a single grimy window near the ceiling. For a moment he saw nothing amiss. Then, a slight movement in the deepest shadows caught his eye. He stepped inside, his senses on high alert. And then he saw her. She was slumped against a stack of burlap sacks, half hidden behind a pickle barrel. Her wrists and ankles were bound tightly with coarse rope, another rope acting as a gag, digging cruelly into the corners of her mouth. Her dress, a simple calico of a faded blue, was torn at the shoulder and stained dark with what could only be blood. A fresh, angry gash marred her forehead, blood still trickling from it, matting her dark, disheveled hair. Her eyes, when they flickered open and met his, were wide with a terror so profound it struck him like a physical blow, quickly followed by a dazed, hopeless resignation. Clara Hawthorne had thought she might die in this cold, dark room. The pain was a throbbing beast, her limbs numb from the bindings, her throat raw from the gag and the single, desperate scream she'd managed before Blackwood's heavy hand had clamped over her mouth. She'd arrived in redemption only a fortnight ago. A widow seeking peace, not prosperity, just a chance to rebuild a life shattered by loss. She'd taken a position with Mr. Blackwood, cleaning and mending in the back rooms, grateful for the small wage. She'd been in the storage room, sorting through a new shipment of linens, when she'd overheard it. Blackwood's hushed, angry tones, arguing with two rough-looking men about something stolen, something valuable, something dangerous. Before she could retreat, before she could even fully comprehend the menace in their voices, they'd found her. Blackwood, his face a mask of fury and fear, had been the one to point. She heard us. The subsequent moments were a blur of violence. A blow to the head, the searing pain of ropes, the suffocating gag. They'd thrown her into the storage room, Blackwood hissing, "You'll stay quiet, girl. If you know what's good for you. We'll deal with you later. The word had echoed in her mind, a death knell. How much time had passed? Hours, surely. Each breath was an agony, each beat of her heart a drum against the encroaching despair. She'd prayed, not for rescue, but for a swift end. And then the door had opened. A tall figure, silhouetted against the dim light from the store. Not Blackwood, not his brutal companions. This man was a stranger, his face shadowed, but the set of his shoulders, the quiet way he moved, spoke not of malice, but of something else. Her heart, which had been a leaden weight, gave a frantic, painful lurch. Hope, she realized with a fresh stab of fear, was a more terrible tormentor than despair. Elijah wasted no time. He holstered his gun, pulled a hunting knife from the sheath on his belt, and knelt beside her. "Easy now," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I'm going to get you out of this." Her eyes, the only part of her face that could convey anything, were fixed on his, searching, questioning. He saw not just fear, but a deep, bone-weary suffering that went beyond her immediate predicament. He cut the gag first carefully, wincing as he saw the raw skin beneath. She gasped, a dry, ragged sound, and coughed, her body trembling. "Easy," he repeated, his gaze steady. He worked quickly, slicing through the ropes at her wrists, then her ankles. The circulation returning was an agony. She cried out, a low moan, and sagged further against the sacks, her head lolling. He noted the pallor of her skin, the clammy sweat on her brow. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone practical, trying to keep her conscious. "Clara," she whispered, her voice hoarse, barely audible. "Clara Hawthorne." Elijah Coulter, he supported her arm as he helped her sit up a little straighter. "What happened here, Clara? Where's Blackwood?" Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her dirt-streaked cheeks. I heard them arguing about stolen goods. They found me," her voice cracked. "Blackwood, he did this." With two others, the memory brought a fresh wave of terror, and she began to shake uncontrollably. Elijah's jaw tightened. Silas Blackwood. He'd always found the man's congeniality too slick, his eyes too shifty. Now he knew why. He looked around the small, oppressive room. "Are they still here?" Clara shook her head weakly. I don't think so. They left after they tied me." He needed to get her out of here to a doctor. His rifle purchase could wait. This was more important. He carefully helped her to her feet. She swayed, her legs barely able to support her, and he put a steadying arm around her waist. She flinched at the contact, then leaned into his support, too weak to do otherwise. He could feel the tremors running through her slight frame. "I'm taking you to Doc Miller," he said. "Then I'll find Sheriff Brody." Clara nodded, a small, jerky movement. The brief walk through the store, past the mundane objects that spoke of normal life, felt surreal. Each step was an effort. As they reached the door, Elijah paused, looking back into the silent, violated space. A cold anger settled in him, an anger he rarely allowed himself to feel. He would see justice done for this woman, this Clara Hawthorne, whose only crime, it seemed, was to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The jingle of the bell as they exited sounded different now. Not a welcome, but an alarm, a small, sharp cry against the injustice that had unfolded within those walls. The crisp autumn air felt like a balm on Clara's skin, but the world outside seemed too bright, too open, after the suffocating darkness. She blinked against the sunlight, her gaze unfocused, her body a symphony of pain. Elijah's arm around her was the only solid thing in a tilting world. She was free of the ropes, but not of the fear. Not yet. Transitional tones. Cautious hope, apprehension, quiet determination, growing warmth, mutual respect. Part 2. Shelter and Suspicion. Doc Miller's surgery was a small, clapboard building at the end of Redemption's dusty Main Street. The scent of carbolic acid and old bandages greeted them. Josiah Miller, a man whose spectacles always seemed to be perched precariously on the end of his nose, looked up from his ledgers with a start as Elijah entered, half carrying Clara. "Elijah! Good heavens! Woman, what happened to you?" Doc Miller exclaimed, bustling forward, his initial surprise quickly replaced by professional concern. "Found her tied up in Blackwood's storage room, Doc," Elijah stated grimly, helping Clara to the examination cot. "She needs tending to." Clara's internal world was a maelstrom of pain, shame, and a fragile, flickering relief. Every touch, even the doctor's gentle probing, made her want to recoil. She answered his questions in monosyllables, her gaze fixed on her hands, now raw and bruised where the ropes had bitten deep. She was acutely aware of Elijah Coulter standing near the door, a silent, watchful presence. His quiet strength had been her lifeline in that terrifying storeroom, but now, in the relative safety of the doctor's office, a new wave of humiliation washed over her. To be seen like this, so broken, so vulnerable. Doc Miller cleaned and stitched the gash on her forehead, tutted over the angry welts on her wrists and ankles, and gave her a draft for the pain. "Nasty business," he muttered, shaking his head. "Silas Blackwood, you say? I wouldn't have figured him for this kind of brutality, though there have been whispers. Unsavory types seen coming and going from his place late at night." Elijah's expression remained impassive, but his eyes were hard. "I'm going to fetch Sheriff Brody. Will she be all right here for a spell, Doc?" "She'll be fine. Needs rest, food, and to feel safe. My wife, Sarah, can come sit with her." Clara managed a faint, "Thank you," her voice still a reedy whisper. As Elijah left, a small, irrational part of her felt a pang of abandonment, immediately followed by shame at her own dependency. She was a survivor, she had always been. But this was different. This had been personal, malicious. Sheriff Brody was a portly man whose main concerns usually revolved around stray cattle or drunken brawls at the saloon. The news of what happened at Blackwood's Mercantile clearly disturbed him, jolting him out of his usual complacency. He listened to Elijah's terse account, his brow furrowed. "Blackwood? Tied her up, you say? And him gone missing?" Brody scratched his jaw. That's a serious accusation, Elijah. We'll need to look into this." "You're sure about what she said?" Elijah's gaze didn't waver. "I'm sure about what I saw, Sheriff. And I believe her." Right then, Brody heaved himself to his feet. "I'll form a posse. We'll check the Mercantile, then ride out, see if we can find a trail. Blackwood couldn't have gotten far if he's on foot. Those other two she mentioned, any description?" Clara had been too terrified, too disoriented, to offer much beyond rough-looking and mean. While the sheriff organized his men, Elijah found himself at a loss. His errand for the rifle was forgotten. His thoughts kept returning to Clara Hawthorne, to the stark terror in her eyes. He wasn't a man given to flights of fancy, but there was a quiet dignity about her, even in her battered state, that resonated with something deep inside him. Perhaps it was the memory of his own wife, Martha, who had faced her final illness with such quiet courage. He returned to the doctor's office later that afternoon. Sarah Miller, a kind-faced woman with flour on her apron, met him at the door. "She's sleeping now, Mr. Coulter." The draft finally took hold. "Poor dear. She's been through a terrible ordeal." Elijah nodded. "Is there anything she needs?" "Rest mostly. And when she wakes, some broth. She hasn't eaten." Sheriff Brody stopped by, asked her a few questions, but she was barely able to speak. Sarah Miller paused. "She has no kin in town, does she?" "Mentioned she was new here." "I don't believe so," Elijah said. The thought of her being alone, with no one to turn to, settled heavily on him. He found himself stopping by Doc Miller's again the next day, ostensibly to check on her progress for the sheriff, but if he was honest with himself, it was more than that. Clara was awake, propped up on pillows, looking pale but a little more composed. The bruises on her face were a stark reminder of her trauma. "Mr. Coulter," she said, her voice a little stronger. There was a cautiousness in her eyes, a wariness he understood. "Miss Hawthorne," he held his hat awkwardly in his hands. "Just came to see how you were faring." "Better, thank you. Mrs. Miller has been very kind." A faint blush touched her cheeks. "And thank you for what you did. Anyone would have done the same." He deflected, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Not everyone," she said quietly, and he knew she was right. Over the next few days, a fragile routine developed. Elijah would stop by after tending to his ranch chores, sometimes bringing a bit of jerky or some apples from his small orchard, small, practical offerings. He learned that she was a widow, that she'd come to redemption hoping for a fresh start. She learned that he was a widower, with an 8-year-old daughter named Lily. Their conversations were brief, punctuated by long silences. Yet in those silences, a sense of understanding began to grow. He saw her quiet resilience, the way she refused to dwell on her victimhood, focusing instead on small steps toward recovery. She saw his steadfastness, the unspoken kindness beneath his reserved exterior. Sheriff Brody's investigation, however, yielded little. Blackwood had vanished. The 2 men Clara had described were ghosts. The stolen goods, whatever they were also gone. Some in town whispered that Clara must have exaggerated, or perhaps been involved somehow. Small towns could be quick to judge, especially a woman alone, a newcomer. Clara felt the chill of those unspoken suspicions, the averted gazes, and it made her withdraw further. Martha Henderson, the proprietor of the boarding house where Clara had briefly stayed before taking the job with Blackwood, proved to be a true ally. A woman of sharp wit and a kinder heart than many knew, Martha visited Clara regularly, bringing nourishing broths and practical advice. "Don't you mind their gossip, dearie?" Martha said one afternoon, fluffing Clara's pillows. "Fools will talk. You just focus on getting strong." Clara offered a weak smile. "It's hard not to, Mrs. Henderson. I came here for peace, and all I've found is trouble. Sometimes trouble finds us, child, no matter how peaceful we try to be. The important thing is how we face it." A week after her rescue, Clara was deemed well enough to leave Doc Miller's care. But where was she to go? She had no money, no job. The thought of returning to the boarding house, facing the curious stares and whispered comments, filled her with dread. Elijah arrived as she was awkwardly trying to tie the ribbons of her bonnet with her still sore fingers. He saw the anxiety in her eyes. "Miss Hawthorne," he began, then hesitated. It was a bold offer, perhaps too bold, but the alternative, leaving her to fend for herself in a town that was already judging her, was unthinkable. I have a proposal. If you're amenable." Clara looked at him, her expression guarded. "My daughter Lily," he continued, his gaze fixed somewhere over Clara's shoulder. "She lost her mother 3 years ago. We have a housekeeper, Mrs. Albright, but she's getting on in years. And, well, Lily could use a woman's influence. And I could use help around the ranch. Mending, cooking, things Mrs. Albright finds difficult now. It wouldn't be much, room and board, a small wage when I can manage it. But it would be a safe place. And quiet." Clara stared at him, speechless. A safe place. Quiet. Those words were like water to a parched throat. She knew what he was offering, not charity, but a chance to work, to earn her keep, to heal away from prying eyes. It was an act of profound, unexpected kindness. "Mr. Coulter," she began, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say." "Think on it," he said gruffly, uncomfortable with her display of emotion. "No need to decide right away." But Clara knew her answer. The thought of the Open Sky Ranch, a place she'd only heard him mention, sounded like a sanctuary. And the thought of a child, a small flicker of warmth ignited in her weary heart. "I accept, Mr. Coulter," she said, her voice firmer now. "And I thank you." A barely perceptible nod was his only reply, but she saw the relief in his eyes. "I'll bring the wagon around in the morning." The next day, as they rode out of Redemption, Clara felt a mixture of apprehension and cautious hope. The town, with its judging eyes and painful memories, receded behind them. Ahead lay the vast, rolling prairie, under an enormous blue sky. The Open Sky Ranch. It sounded like a promise. Lily Coulter was a miniature version of her father, with the same serious gray eyes, though hers held a child's curiosity rather than a man's weariness. She regarded Clara with a shy, solemn gaze when Elijah introduced them. "Lily, this is Miss Hawthorne. She'll be staying with us for a while, helping out." "Hello?" Lily whispered, half hiding behind her father's legs. Clara knelt, bringing herself to the child's level. "Hello, Lily. It's very nice to meet you," she offered a gentle smile. And after a moment, Lily offered a shy one in return. The ranch house was sturdy, built of timber and stone, clearly a man's domain but clean and well-kept, thanks to the elderly Mrs. Albright, who greeted Clara with a kind, if slightly reserved, welcome. Clara was given a small, neat room under the eaves, with a view of the endless grasslands. It felt miles away from the dark terror of Blackwood's storeroom. The days settled into a new rhythm. Clara, her physical strength slowly returning, threw herself into her work. She cooked wholesome meals, mended clothes with a skill that impressed even the taciturn Elijah, and kept the house with a quiet efficiency. She found solace in the simple, tangible tasks, and slowly, cautiously, she began to build a connection with Lily. She would read to the child in the evenings, her voice soft and soothing. She taught Lily how to sew, patiently guiding her small fingers. Lily, starved for maternal affection, blossomed under Clara's gentle attention, her shyness replaced by an open, trusting affection that warmed Clara's healing heart. Elijah watched it all, mostly in silence. He saw the life returning to Clara's eyes, the way she moved with increasing confidence. He saw the joy she brought to Lily. He found himself looking forward to the evenings, to the quiet hum of conversation in the kitchen, the scent of baking bread, the sight of Clara and Lily bent over a book by the firelight. His ranch, once a place of solitary work and quiet grief, was slowly transforming. It was becoming a home again. He and Clara rarely spoke of her ordeal. The unspoken understanding was that the ranch was a place for healing, not for dwelling on past horrors. But the shadow of Blackwood and his associates still lingered. Sheriff Brody had reported no leads. It was as if the men had vanished from the face of the earth. Clara tried to push the fear away, but sometimes, in the dead of night, she would wake with a start. The memory of the ropes, the gag, the chilling threat in Blackwood's voice, still vivid and terrifying. One evening, as a chill wind howled outside, rattling the window panes, Elijah found Clara staring into the fire, her expression troubled. "Something wrong?" he asked, his voice low. She started, then gave a small, shaky smile. "Just the wind. It sounds a bit like voices." He understood her unspoken fear. He moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "You're safe here, Clara. No one will harm you at Open Sky." She looked up at him, her gaze meeting his. In his steady gray eyes, she saw not pity, but a quiet determination, a promise of protection. And for the first time in a long, long while, a fragile tendril of peace began to unfurl within her. The warmth from the hearth seemed to seep into her very bones, chasing away some of the lingering chill of her fear. The growing respect between them was a silent language, spoken in shared chores, small kindnesses, and the mutual comfort of quiet companionship. The journey was far from over, but here, under the vast Montana sky, Clara felt a flicker of something she'd thought lost forever. Cautious hope. Part 3. Confrontation and culmination. Culminating tones. Earned love, security, empowerment, quiet joy, peace. The quiet rhythm of life at Open Sky Ranch was a balm to Clara's wounded spirit. Weeks turned into months. The harsh bite of early winter gave way to the deep snows, then the tentative thaw of spring. With the changing seasons, Clara, too, felt a transformation within herself. The haunted look in her eyes began to recede, replaced by a quiet serenity. Her laughter, initially hesitant, became more frequent, especially in response to Lily's childish antics. She moved with a newfound grace, no longer flinching at sudden movements or unexpected sounds. The ranch, and the two souls who inhabited it, had become her sanctuary. Elijah, a man more comfortable with the silence of the plains than the complexities of emotion, found himself changing as well. The emptiness left by his wife's passing, an ache he had carried for years, began to lessen. Clara's presence filled the house not just with the scent of baking and the warmth of a well-tended hearth, but with a gentle strength that he had come to rely on, to admire. He found himself seeking out her company, sharing observations about the ranch, the weather, even occasionally a memory of his late wife, something he rarely did with anyone. Their conversations remained understated, their affection expressed more in actions than words. He'd mend a loose step on the porch he knew she used often. She'd ensure his coffee was always hot, his favorite biscuits baked just right. It was in these small, unspoken gestures that their bond deepened, a slow, steady current pulling them closer. Lily, blissfully unaware of the adult undercurrents, was the joyful bridge between them, her innocent love for both Clara and her father weaving them into a semblance of family. One crisp spring morning, Elijah rode into Redemption for supplies. He returned late in the afternoon, his expression unusually grim. Clara, who had been watching for him from the porch with Lily, felt a familiar knot of apprehension tighten in her stomach. "What is it, Elijah?" she asked as he dismounted. He hesitated, then said, "Word in town." Two men, matching the description of Blackwood's associates, were seen asking questions. Asking about a woman who used to work for Blackwood. Clara's blood ran cold. "Here? They know I'm here." "Not for certain, but they're sniffing around. Sheriff Brody's keeping an eye out, but—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Brody was one man, and these were desperate, dangerous individuals. Blackwood, it was rumored, had double-crossed them, and they were looking for him, or for anything of value he might have left behind. Perhaps something they believed Clara knew about or possessed. The fragile piece of open sky was shattered. Fear, an old, unwelcome companion, returned to haunt Clara's nights. But this time it was different. She wasn't alone. Elijah was there, his quiet strength a bulwark against her terror. "We'll be ready for them," he said, his voice low and steady. He checked his rifle, his shotgun, his Colt. There was a grim determination in his eyes that was both frightening and reassuring. They didn't have to wait long. A few days later, as dusk was settling over the prairie, casting long, eerie shadows, Lily, who had been playing near the barn, came running towards the house, her face pale with fright. "Papa! Papa!" Two men, on horses. "They're coming up the track. They look mean." Elijah and Clara exchanged a look. This was it. "Clara, take Lily to the root cellar," Elijah commanded, his voice sharp but controlled. "Lock it from the inside. Stay there, no matter what you hear." "But Elijah—" "Do it, Clara. Now!" There was no arguing with the steel in his voice. Clara grabbed Lily's hand, her heart pounding, and hurried the child towards the heavy wooden door of the root cellar, set into the side of a small earthen mound near the kitchen garden. "Be brave, little one," she whispered to Lily, trying to keep the tremor out of her own voice, as she bolted the thick door from within. The cellar was dark, damp, smelling of earth and stored vegetables. Lily clung to her, whimpering. Clara held her tight, straining her ears for any sound from above. Outside, Elijah took up a position behind the sturdy stone wall of the corral, his rifle loaded and ready. He watched as the two riders approached, slow and deliberate, their faces hard and predatory in the fading light. Jed Stone and Patch Rooker. They matched the vague descriptions Clara had given. Coulter, Stone called out, his voice raspy. We're looking for someone. A woman. Silas Blackwood sent us a blatant lie, Elijah knew. Blackwood was long gone. No woman here by that name. Elijah called back, his voice even. You're on private property. Best you ride on out. Rooker let out a harsh laugh. We ain't leaving without what we came for. Blackwood owed us. And we figure she knows where he stashed it. She knows nothing, Elijah stated. And she's not here. We'll see about that. Stone snarled, and then, without warning, he raised his pistol and fired. The bullet whined past Elijah's head, thudding into the barn wall behind him. The exchange of gunfire began. Elijah was a good shot, but he was outnumbered. He fired sparingly, making each shot count, while the two assailants, emboldened by their numbers, fired more recklessly. Inside the root cellar, Clara and Lily huddled together, each gunshot a fresh stab of terror. Lily was crying softly. Clara, listening to the terrifying sounds of the fight, felt a desperate helplessness. Elijah was out there, alone, defending them, defending her. Then, she remembered the old, rusty shotgun Elijah kept in the cellar for emergencies, along with a box of shells. He'd shown it to her once, half-jokingly saying, just in case the coyotes get too bold. A new resolve, born of desperation and a fierce, protective love for this man and his child, surged through her. She couldn't just hide. She wouldn't. Lily, stay here. Be very quiet. I have to help your papa. No, Clara, don't go. Lily sobbed, clinging to her. I have to, sweet girl. He needs me gently. She pried Lily's fingers loose, her mind racing. She fumbled in the dark for the shotgun, her hands surprisingly steady. She found the shells loaded too. The gun was heavy, unfamiliar, but the thought of Elijah facing those men alone was unbearable. She unbolted the cellar door, inch by painstaking inch, her heart hammering against her ribs. Peeking out, she saw one of the men, Rooker, trying to circle around the barn, clearly intending to flank Elijah. Elijah was pinned down, returning fire towards Stone, who was using a water trough for cover. Clara knew nothing about fighting, but she knew about angles. She knew about desperation. Taking a deep breath, she slipped out of the cellar, keeping low, using the vegetable patch and then a woodpile for cover, until she was positioned at the side of the house, with a clear, if distant, view of Rooker's back. Her hands trembled as she raised the shotgun. It felt impossibly heavy. She remembered Elijah's words from long ago, when he'd been teaching her to handle a smaller rifle for pest control. Aim steady, squeeze. Don't jerk. She aimed for Rooker's legs, praying she wouldn't kill him, just stop him. She squeezed the trigger. The shotgun roared, its recoil slamming into her shoulder, nearly knocking her off her feet. Rooker screamed, a high, thin sound, and crumpled to the ground, clutching his thigh. The sudden, unexpected shot from a new direction startled Stone. He looked up, momentarily distracted. It was the opening Elijah needed. He fired his rifle, a clean shot. Stone dropped his pistol, grabbing his shoulder, and staggered back. Elijah was on his feet instantly, rifle still aimed. Drop it, both of you. Rooker was groaning on the ground. Stone, bleeding and defeated, let his remaining weapon fall. Clara rushed out, the heavy shotgun still in her hands, her face pale but resolute. Elijah stared at her, then at the downed men, a look of stunned disbelief on his face. Clara? I had to, she whispered, the adrenaline leaving her weak and trembling. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, took the shotgun from her nerveless fingers, and then, to her utter astonishment, pulled her into a fierce, desperate hug. "You crazy, brave woman," he murmured into her hair. "You saved my life." She clung to him, tears streaming down her face, a mixture of relief, fear, and a dawning, overwhelming joy. In his arms, she felt safe, truly safe. They tied up Stone and the wounded Rooker. The next morning, Elijah rode them into Redemption and handed them over to a suitably impressed Sheriff Brody. The story of the rancher and the quiet woman who had defended their home against 2 desperate outlaws spread through town like wildfire. The whispers about Clara Hawthorne changed from suspicion to admiration. She was no longer just the victim from Blackwood's store. She was a woman of courage, of resilience. When Elijah returned to the ranch, he found Clara on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. Lily was asleep inside. A comfortable silence settled between them. Finally, Elijah spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "Clara, what you did?" He struggled for words, a rare occurrence for him. She turned to him, her eyes soft. "We protected our home, Elijah. Our family." He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and saw not just the brave woman who had faced down danger, but the gentle soul who had mended his broken life, who had brought warmth and laughter back into his home, who had captured his guarded heart. "Clara," he said, taking her hand. His calloused fingers closed around hers, a firm, comforting grip. I reckon this ranch wouldn't be much of a home without you. Without you and Lily." Her heart swelled. This wasn't a grand declaration, but in his quiet, understated way, it was everything. "Nor for me, Elijah," she whispered. "It's the only home I want." He leaned down then and kissed her, a slow, tender kiss that spoke of shared hardships, quiet understanding, and a love that had been earned, built on respect and resilience. It was a kiss that promised a future, a shared life under the vast, open sky. In the days and weeks that followed, a quiet joy settled over Open Sky Ranch. The shadows of the past had been confronted and, if not entirely banished, then certainly diminished by the light of their shared courage and growing love. Clara found a peace she had never thought possible, a sense of belonging that healed the deepest wounds. Elijah, his stoic reserve softened by love, found a renewed purpose, a happiness he'd thought lost forever. Lily thrived in the warmth of their affection, her laughter echoing across the prairie. The community of Redemption, once a source of suspicion, now embraced Clara. Martha Henderson beamed like a proud mother hen. Even Sheriff Brody tipped his hat with newfound respect. Silas Blackwood was never found, but his power to cause harm had ended. The stolen goods, whatever they were, remained a mystery, but they no longer mattered. Clara and Elijah had found treasures far more valuable: love, security, and a family forged in adversity. Clara often thought back to that terrible day in Blackwood's storage closet, not with terror, but with a strange sense of gratitude. For it was in that darkness that the first spark of her new life had been ignited, when a quiet rancher, looking for a rifle, had instead found her, and in doing so, had shown her the path to an open sky and a mended heart. She had faced injustice and found her strength. She had known loneliness and found belonging. She had endured quiet suffering and found a quiet, profound joy. Here, with Elijah and Lily, under the protective gaze of the Montana heavens, she was finally home. Call to action YouTube. The journey of healing often begins in the most unexpected of places, and true strength is often found not in the absence of fear, but in the courage to face it, especially when we find those worth protecting. Clara and Elijah's story reminds us that even after the deepest wounds, love can find a way to bloom, and a broken heart can, with time and tenderness, be mended. If their story of resilience and earned love touched your heart, please give this video a like and subscribe for more tales of courage and connection. What part of Clara's journey resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Perhaps you know someone who needs to hear a story of hope and second chances. Feel free to share this with them. There are so many truths left to tell, so many hearts waiting to find their own open sky.